Hello all and welcome to my video series guide on how to play the Offlane by DNC. Now, I've been wanting to make this guide for quite some time because I find that there's not a lot of good content about the Offlane in general online. So before we begin, who am I? I'm literally a nobody. I'm not even on Wikipedia for some reason. Obviously. Um, my peak MMR was just about 8k, just a little bit under, and I've been playing Offlane pretty much my whole life, right? I started playing Dota in 2014. I didn't play Dota 1 before that. I didn't play Hon before that. I think I have just under 10,000 games, and most of those, or a lot of those, are in the offlane. Now, what makes the offlane so special, or makes it different from the other roles? The first thing is there aren't a lot of guides, or even a lot of replay highlights online. It's not a very flashy role. You won't see yourself going 20-0 or 30-0 on the offlane very often. Um, the reason there aren't a lot of guides is because this is not a role that can be condensed into very cookie cutter builds. For example, if you play Anti-Mage, you can watch a guide, it will tell you to go Battle Fury Manta, it will tell you where to farm, it will tell you when to farm, what your item timings should be like. Now, the reason the offlane is harder to make a guide like that is because as the position 3, you are exactly in the middle of the pack in terms of farm priority. What this means is that if you're having a hard game, sometimes your team will help you, sometimes they won't. If you're having a good game, sometimes you can snowball, sometimes you can't. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that as anti-mage, you are always going to be playing for the same goal. Buy your Battle Fury, farm the jungle, buy your Manta, buy your Abyssal, kill people, win the game. As an offlane hero, let's say you're Tide Hunter, sometimes you're going to be playing as the tank. So you got Pipe and Crimson Guard, for example, and you stand in the front and you tank everything. Sometimes you're the initiator, so you rush Blink. Sometimes you have to play like a carry and you get Solar Crest Desolator. Sometimes you have to play as a spellcaster and you get Axe, so on and so forth. Now, with all these different possibilities, you also have very different builds. Do you max Anchor Smash? Do you max Kraken Shell? What level do you take Gush? I find that generally speaking, most carries, they're going to be doing very similar builds. Offlane, you're always going to be doing something different every game, I'd say. And it very much depends on the flow of the game, your team, your enemies, how your lane went, etc., etc. This means that most decisions you make are going to be very specific and on a case by case basis. Whenever I see online people ask me, what should I skill on Sand King, for example, I'll tell them it depends. They'll ask me what items I should buy, and I'll tell them it depends. And they'll ask me if yours is good, they'll ask me if Veil is good, they'll ask me if they should be farming or fighting, and I'll tell them it depends. So I'm not very helpful to them, right? When I see carry players ask questions like, oh, where should my timing on Manta Star be on Anti-Mage? People will just tell them like 20 minutes, 21 minutes. When someone asks me what my Blink timing should be on Sand King, I tell them sometimes you don't even have to get a Blink. Now, I understand that this is quite a annoying thing to do or to hear. When you ask a question, you don't really get a straight response, and that's because the offlane is just so difficult to sort of break down into simple terms. As a result, there's not a lot of content, like I said before. Most people, they won't bother telling you about every single matchup or the sort of specific mechanics. They'll just tell you the offlane is supposed to make space, you're supposed to fight, and that's pretty much it. So as a result, I find that the offlane generally people go into it a little bit clueless. They don't really know what to do. They don't really have a game plan compared to the other roles, and it tends to lead to a lot of failure. Very rarely you will see a carry player having just an awful game where they feel like they can't do anything. Obviously, you're going to have difficult games, but generally speaking, your team is still going to be trying to make space for you. Even if you get your Battle Fury at 25 minutes as anti-mage, you're still playing the game. If you have a really bad game as an offlaner like Sand King, and you go 0-4 in the first 5 minutes, every time you walk into lane, you're dying. Um, you're not given space in the jungle to farm, and you're expected to carry the team with absolutely no items and an awful score. Um, so what I've described so far is probably pretty sad. So why would anyone want to play offlane? First of all, if you're a massacist, this is a great lane. You get a lot of hate, you get a lot of flame. But also, this is a great lane for people who like to think. It's good for people who like to sort of solve a problem when they're playing. Um, I just think it's a very interesting lane. You go into a game, you're not 100% sure what you're going to do, and then you get to make the decisions and you get to see if you win the game as a result of it or not. It really is the impact role. You're going to be dictating the tempo of the game most of the time from like minute 0 to minute 20. You're basically going to be carrying the entire team on your back for long periods of time, and sometimes you're just going to have great games. In 6K plus, 7K plus, offlane is more popular than mid and carry. You'll find it contested more often. It really is a very fun role once you get into the swing of things and you understand what you're doing. Finally, in this first video, I'm just going to be talking about the mentality to learning. The first thing I say is don't just copy what pro players do ever. Don't go on Dota Pro Tracker and do the same build 200 times in a row. If you go on Dota Pro Tracker right now and you look at Mars, you'll find that it's recommended you max your Q and you take no points in E. If you play like that 200 games in a row, you're going to become very good at Mars. You're going to hit all your spears, I hope. You're going to learn how to CS. You're going to know what your damage numbers are like at different levels. Unfortunately, what you won't learn is that sometimes against certain matchups, you might have to take a level in Bulwark. Sometimes you don't have to rush Blink. Sometimes you don't have to get Soul Ring. I recommend you do what you think is right and you try to see the fact that there's a lot of different possibilities. I'll try and cover this a little bit more in depth in the future, but for now, I'll just say if you do the same build every game, you're not going to learn a lot about the different matchups. Next part is about active learning. A lot of people I know, they tell me they watch all these BSJ videos and all these game league videos and it's all great and they're rising really fast through the ranks, and I look at their in-game medal and it's Legend 3 for their entire life. Now, watching a video, you might be listening to someone talk really fast like I am right now, and you might be thinking, man, there's a lot of information here that I'm gaining. Unfortunately, if it doesn't go into your brain, then it doesn't really do anything. So after you watch a video by the extremely talented Mr. BSJ or Jenkins or whoever it might be, try to actually think about what is it specifically that you've learned. If you watch a 30-minute video and all you learn is I should push out the lanes more as support, that's kind of a waste of time. You can just read that over your screen or something. Whenever I watch these videos, I hear and see a lot more than what the 3Ks tell me. Um, I don't really have any specific recommendations for how to do this. For me, I will open TextPad and I'll write down exactly what they're talking about and what I'm learning, and I'll read back over it. Now, you might have a different way of learning, but what I recommend is you don't watch these videos when you're high, when you're drunk, when you don't really care. If you want to watch it at times 2 speed, try to really focus. Now, the final thing I'm going to talk about is um, your mentality in game. The first thing I'll say is don't think about what your teammates are doing. What I mean by that is if you have a tiny on your team who tosses your mid laner into the enemy tower 15 times, right? You might think that this game is a complete waste of time. And to a certain extent it is. You're going to lose 30 MMR. But what you need to remember is that you're not going to have this tiny on your team every single game for your whole life. And more importantly, him tossing your mid laner into the enemy tower does not make you a worse player in any way. Everyone's MMR will eventually reach their skill if you play enough games. When someone ruins your game, they take away 30 MMR, but they won't take away your skill. Unless you tilt to the point where you're so angry that next game you play really badly as a result. So just remember, they can take away your MMR, but they can never take away your skill. And finally, I just want to say, try to have fun when you play. If something doesn't seem fun to you, like watching the pro scene or watching your own replays, then I recommend just not doing it. If one day you feel like you want to do it, then you should do it. Like doing something that you don't want to do, I find generally has no results really. I didn't like to watch the pro scene. I watched a few games. I was half asleep during all of them. I feel like I didn't learn anything. There's different techniques for different people. And finally, um, I recommend that when you play, you always try to give 100%. What I mean by that is if you play a game and you're drunk, right, and you try and experiment with a new build and it goes horribly, you're not going to be able to say specifically that this build is bad or maybe I just played bad because I was drunk. It's like you haven't learned anything. I would recommend making a, let's just call it an alternate account so Reddit doesn't lynch me. And whenever you don't feel 100%, you don't want to play, you don't want to talk, just mad at the world, just play on your alternate account first pick Pudge, fuck it. Um, so that's pretty much it for this introduction video. Um, If you think that this is kind of very broad bullshit statements, that's fine. Because in the future, I think the next video is also going to be like this sort of format in PowerPoint. But after that, I'll be showing specific in-game examples. So stay tuned.